meeting will be recorded for the purposes of the minutes and will be broadcasted online. If you're not happy with that, then please let us know. Thank you. Thank you and welcome to you all here. So we'll make the start and we'll begin with apologies. Councillor Mike Stevens, Councillor Judith Humphreys, Councillor Phil Cabber. Anyone else? No, no further apologies. So declaration of interest.
Mr. Chairman, can I declare a prejudicial interest in item 4.3?
Okay.
Very well, thank you. That was Jane. Thank you, Jane. So we'll now go on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are they a correct record, please? Owain? Yes, I propose that they're correct, but I do have one question on being correct, and that's on page 4. Item 5.4. So 4.4, sorry, the Welsh Communities Housing Scheme. There was that I actually asked that asking the government to review the TAN 20, but there's nothing in that in the minutes that we've actually recorded that. I do remember that we did, that we should do that, that we did decide, but I don't think it's been minuted. So if you're willing to accept that change, then I'm happy to propose them as a correct record. I've got one thing I'd like to correct. I can't remember. It's the 106. I didn't have the Geirgen Dinas, but it was a house in Bonthi.
Okay.
Then it was a house in Bonthi. So we've had a proposal that they are correct. We have a seconder. Edgar? Yes, just to be clear, I'm proposing it with that amendment. Yes, that's the one I'm seconding, and also with my amendment in terms of that house. Could you please show if you're in agreement, please? With a green hand, with a yes. If not, red. I think that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. So we'll now go on to the planning applications. Chair, I do have one matters arising from the minutes. Page 7, the last but one decision. A decision that officers should update the reference to the Local Government Act, and I've noticed that that item hasn't been included on this agenda. Could perhaps the officers just explain how they've come to that decision, please? Who will take this item? Who will take this point, please? Iwan? I'm happy to respond to that. That legislation is not relevant any longer. There we are. So there's no need to refer to it then, is there? No. And so we probably haven't needed to do that for many years then, possibly. No, you're quite right. Thank you. So we'll now go on to the planning, the Capercaire car park. Richard.
Good
morning, everyone.
This application refers to let me just share my screen. This refers to the proposed siting of a new building to house 11 kV electric substation. It's been brought to committee as it's on National Park owned land in the corner of the car park on the corner. This is the A5 and the A4086. It's the National Park car park, which isn't obvious from public vantage points other than very close by. I mean, it is a very popular.
We're not seeing the screen.
Sorry. Let me try again. Oh, hang on. Is that better? Let me just getting a call through. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, Richard.
Am I sharing now? Yes.
Yeah.
It's apologies for that. It's application by Scottish Power for the erection of a 11 kV substation, electric substation on National Park owned land at a car park in Kilkirrig. This is the car park here, A5, which runs through, and the 408/6. It's not immediately obvious from public vantage points along the highway, but it is on quite a popular car park and walking route up towards Tryfan and beyond. The building itself is a fairly modest building. We've managed to negotiate that it is all stone faced with slate roof. In the corner of the car park here, the car park is it's not one that we charge for, and it is it's not laid out formally as a car park. There's no car parking bays. There's likelihood that we'll lose one space there depending on how people park. The site itself is in this corner here. There is unfortunately necessary to lose 3 sessile oaks, but as we see it, it's a grassed area here, so it's not impinging too much on the loss of car parking spaces. For biodiversity enhancements, there is a proposal to replace these trees with some hedging. There's a row of hedging along here to hide the building from people walking up the lane here. There is a correction in the report. I got my north and south the wrong way around on paragraph 1.9. On the south side of the car park, there is proposal to plant 18 meters of hedging, which will help with biodiversity and a line for bats. It's right next to the river, so it'll be a good foraging route for protected species. So this is the area, this is the car park. As you can see, it's fairly loosely marked out. Well, it's not marked out at all, but cars park indiscriminately on the site and in the middle here. One space possibly lost. The reasoning behind the building is to facilitate undergrounding of lines elsewhere within Kilkirrig and to get rid of what's known as H poles, which are 2 poles, vertical poles with a transformer in between, which are quite intrusive in the landscape. So they will all go as well as overhead lines. So any impact that this building might have will be mitigated against by the removal of the overhead power lines. So overall, the benefit to the environment is felt to be positive. So I mean, it does fit in with the relevant planning policies, and the conclusions are that whilst the building will have an impact, the overall impact with the loss of the H poles and the overhead lines will be of benefit to the special qualities. On that basis, I've been able to recommend approval to you with standard conditions, stonework sample, so we will try and match in the stonework with the stone wall that is on the northern boundary of the site, and make sure that the planting of the hedging is progressed and is established. So recommendation is to approve.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Gawn ni luniau'r pwyllgor yn ôl.
So if we can get everyone back on screen, thank you. Owain. Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a question for Richard in terms of the biodiversity improvement.
Am gwelliannau net ac
The letter from the Chief Officer asking for the net improvements, and I'm just wondering, how have you balanced, how have you weighed up those gains against the losses because of the trees?
Well, yeah, I mean, the trees not only provide biodiversity enhancement, but they are a feature in the landscape. It is certainly a shame that we have to get rid of the sessile oaks. They're not great samples, but they are good samples of the trees. They're wind blown, but the net benefit will be that the hedging will provide a foraging route for bats and protected species, as well as for nesting birds, whereas the trees at the moment don't provide that foraging route next to the river. There are bats there. There isn't a protected species survey, so that is the net benefit, is that it will provide that foraging route along the river edge.
diolch.
Iawn, diolch. Ifor?
Ifor?
Ie, diolch, Cadeirydd.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I see it as a great pity, actually, losing these trees. They more or less stand on the boundary. So if you lose one, but will those two trees actually mitigate? And also with a hedgerow, will they actually screen this new building?
If I just share the screen again, I'll try and explain. If I go to the site plan, there will be, the proposal is to provide a hedge along that boundary, along that edge there. So it will provide screening for people. I mean, people are going to be walking very close to it anyway. So a hedge here won't screen it, but that will provide a screen for people from a distance from seeing the building. And the other hedge is along this boundary here. And then there's the a river Avon here along this boundary here. So it was considered putting a hedge along here, but we felt it was probably better putting it here because it will screen when people come in from the south.
And what kind of hedge are you intending to plant?
It's native species. It has been looked at by our tree officer, and species have been the native mixed native species appropriate for the sites, and will provide a good screen up to 1.8 meters high.
Up to 6 foot. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I just, it grieves me losing at least two very good, well-established 20-year-old.
I certainly don't disagree with you.
I just think with a bit of imagination, just moving the building forward slightly could have saved 2 trees, and the combination with a hedge would work. I'm not sure. It's not sitting well with me. Sorry. Diolch.
Iawn, diolch Ifor.
Thank you, Ifor. Next, Elfed. Yes, thank you. How much of the roof will be visible then? I can see from that photograph you've got the stone wall, but when you go outside of the car park, how much of the roof will be visible from outside? It looks quite a high building.
Yeah, the building is 4.8 meters high to ridge. So yes, it's not going to be hidden at all. But it is a slate roof, and it's not an unusual building to see in a rural environment. It will be slate roofed, and stone clad.
Okay, and regarding way leave payments or something like that, what's the situation with getting planning on National Park car park? What's the situation there?
The property manager has, or the applicants have negotiated a lease with the property manager.
Okay, and are they going to maintain the car park as well in that package, or?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Diolch, Jet. Diolch.
Thank you,
Iawn.
Richard. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, really. The first related to the trees. I'm feeling very much like Ivor, and if those trees have to go, as well as the hedging, is it possible to have some more standard trees of similar species put into the hedging, so that in time you do create more of a vertical dimension to the location, not necessarily the hedging that is close to the building for obvious reasons, but other hedging there is the possibility of that. That's the first point. The second point is relating to the height of the building. It's not clear from the diagrams to me whether the base of the building is going to be at the car park level, or in other words, is the bank going to be dug out? And if the bank is going to be dug out, is there any reason why the building can't be placed on the boundary itself? Because it's going to be prominent in the landscape, whichever we do, and you would then not take up so much of the car parking space as is currently proposed. So those would be the three main points that I'd like some clarification on, please.
Now, the building, the base of the building will be on a level with the car parking surface as it currently stands. Let me just, sorry, I'll share the screen again. There is a bank along here which will be maintained, so it will be in, the building will be lowered to the level of the car park, and the bank along here will not be taken out. There is a bank here, so along this edge here, that there will be a bank to the side of the footpath, and the level is level with the car park. So this bank, the bank at the rear, will not be gouged out, because there is a very good stone wall along this boundary here. So that has to be maintained. There has to be to the rear of the building, that the land will rise up towards the to the stone wall.
It was just that it's not uncommon to see effectively field barns, because this is a bit like a field barn actually placed on the boundary.
Yes.
Where effectively on the whatever it is, the northern boundary, the gable end would form the wall, and instead of the bank, you'd have a wall on the footpath side, and then you would be saving some of the space of the car park. And I don't know how that would look visually, but to my mind, it might actually be better visually than what we've got at the moment.
That would, yeah. I mean, I'd have to go back to the applicants on that, but yes, I mean that would push the building back probably about 4 meters towards the rear boundary.
And you would save then, even if you didn't go to the southwestern boundary, you would save at least some of your car parking area that you're losing.
Fair point. Yeah, I'd have to go back. I'd have to go back to the applicants to see if they're amenable to push.
I mean, others may disagree, but that was my view. And I think the other question was that of if we're putting in more hedging, is there any way of creating standards in that hedging, and not the ones that are directly around the building, but if we're putting in additional hedging, it could go in those.
Yes. I mean, I could certainly put a condition on or I'll get a new biodiversity enhancement plan to include trees. I mean, there are a number of trees around here whether we can put trees in here is not something that I can answer now.
But the loss of the three, it would sit easier with me
Yes.
with the loss of the current 3 trees.
Yes.
If we could at least get an equivalent 3 trees somewhere else on the site.
Well, I mean, there is space around to include more than 3 trees, I'm sure. You know, we could ask for some trees and negotiate additional tree planting around the site, because there is a grass verge along here. We could plant some trees. There is another grassy knoll at this end which we could put some trees on.
Because in the overall scheme of things, it wouldn't affect the southwestern view so much, but some of the other views, it might over time ameliorate the impact of the building.
Yeah. I can certainly ask the question.
Thank you.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, John Pugh.
Thank you, John Pugh. Yes, thank you. You mentioned that you wanted to put stones around the building. If you're talking about saving carbon, and for me, stones are perhaps the dirtiest material. Wouldn't it be better if it was cladded with wood and more natural things, and it would suit the natural environment? And perhaps you could plant some trees then. So I think to put something back or to give something up, especially when it comes to saving carbon. Perhaps there's nothing better either than a slate roof, perhaps.
Okay, and Alwyn.
Alwyn. Yes, thank you, Chair. I also share the concern about losing trees. We know that there's protection order, don't we, on trees in the Gwynant area. And certainly, I'm quite surprised that this permission has been given. It has been discussed. There are some matters that have already come up and have already been discussed. And I'm looking at the area around the building. When we're looking at electricity, etc., is there enough access to this building? Is it possible for Scottish Power to take lorries and vans close to this building? So I'm just concerned about access, and I'm just hoping that nobody parks in front of it.
Richard, do you have that?
Well, I'm not sure that it's something that I can answer on behalf of Scottish Power. I mean, they have designed the building with 2 openings on this side and 1 opening on this side here for to gain access into the building. I don't think it's something I can answer on their behalf. I mean, they must have considered that scenario. I mean, these are only pedestrian for people to gain access into the buildings. Whether they need larger vehicles in close proximity, I can't answer that on their behalf. I'm sorry.
Iawn, Alwyn?
So perhaps is it possible to ask them?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay. Diolch yn fawr. Tim.
Thank you, Tim. A question for Richard. In your report, you mentioned that this is part of a plan in order to get rid of the kilowatt cables around the area.
Yes.
How many H poles will actually be lost, and how many meterage will there be?
I haven't got those figures in front of me, I'm afraid, because it's not part of the application. But it is along the A5. I have got a plan which does show that, but I don't have it in front of me at the moment. But it is all the way down the A5 on the eastern side, and going north and south along Capel Curig. So it is a significant loss of overhead lines in Capel Curig.
Diolch, Richard.
Richard. And so that certainly I welcome that because of it. And I would agree, however, with what Ivor has said about losing the trees. It is a pity of losing trees where there are actually very few trees. Because there are very few there. And I think adding a hedgerow, I would welcome that, but the loss of trees does concern me. And I know certainly that losing the overhead lines would certainly be welcomed. But I think that we should try and keep the trees.
Okay.
Gethin. Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. If it's approved, I do think that there should be an additional condition which states that the work should be undertaken outside of the tourism season, because if that work is undertaken in the summer, for example, then they will take up half of the car park as a construction site possibly. They will take up more space than just that one parcel of the car park. So just a comment as well in passing. We all know we've lost the Llanbedr trees because of carbon, etc. I understand that we want to improve the visibility, but what is the actual carbon footprint of making this change, of making them an underground in the greater scheme of things then? So what is the carbon gain? Is someone able to answer that, please?
Okay.
I don't have
No.
any knowledge on that, I'm afraid.
Well,
Well, I do think if we are considering such applications, I think we should be balancing them against the carbon. So many questions have come up and there are no answers here, and also concerns about these trees. Is it better to defer until we get some answers to these questions? And also, is it possible to try and keep these trees? So I propose that we defer, Chair, and I second. Could we get everyone back on screen, please? Can we stop share screen for a moment? Thank you. So a proposer and a seconder that we should defer this decision in order for us to find some answers to these questions and to see whether it's possible to keep the trees. Owain. That was a legacy hand, Chair. John Pugh. On mute. Coming back to carbon and Gethin's question on carbon, I think it's important these days. Would it be better to use trees as opposed to stones? To look at how much carbon would be saved if they're having to buy it in a local quarry? I think wood is far better for the environment. It may be possible to get an answer to that question. And also I agree with the points that Brian made, using the back wall as well. So we've got a proposal and a second that we should defer this decision. Can we go to a vote? And we need to have answers to these questions to keep the trees, etc. Everyone in favour of deferring the decision, a green hand. Everyone against, a red cross.
Iawn, mae hwnna wedi basio yn y diwedd bod ni'n
So
gohirio.
that has been passed, that we should defer this decision. Is Richard now clear on the questions that need to be answered?
Yeah, let me just run them through them. So we'll have a look at moving the building to include it within the stone wall. So move it sort of northwards by 3 or 4 meters. Investigate timber cladding as opposed to stone, and to get some tree planting in and around the site.
Chair, could I ask one further question, which I would have done if we hadn't gone to the vote? And that is, I noticed there's some fairly large vents on the building. Is that for forced ventilation? And if so, do we have any idea of what the sound impact of that would be? bearing in mind this is a quiet location.
I'll ask that one as well.
Okay, Alwyn? Os llawer di Alwyn ac yn Edgar fyd. Un cwestiwn, Richard. Pan
Ie.
da ni'n plannu gwrych at ba ddiben?
One question, Richard. When we plant hedges, what's it for? Well, you mentioned bats. What about hedgerows where that will feed the birds in winter?
Yes, it is a mix, a native mix of hedging. I'm not sure that I can't answer that specifically for you, whether there is winter foraging in there, but I can certainly ask that as well.
Ona does o ddim, os da chi'n torri gwrych.
There isn't, though. If you cut a hedge, say 1 or 2 meters, there are no berries on that, on those in the winter.
Yeah.
But if you let brambles grow high, for example, different types of birds feed on different types of berries, of course. Anyway, just a thought in passing. Anyway, it's been approved. Can I just come in there? In all fairness, lots of questions have been raised during this discussion, and I think the way forward, really, of course, this is being recorded and Anwen is taking minutes, and then this will be passed on to Richard so that he can ask those relevant questions, all of the relevant questions, in all fairness to everybody, because it's very difficult for him, Richard that is, to raise every or answer every point that's been raised in this meeting. So that's the way forward, I believe. Do you want us to repeat the questions? No, just so that we agree on that. It's fine. Everybody in agreement? I can't see anybody opposing that. Okay, then, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item. Llandyfi, Aberdyfi. I'm taking this in Iona's absence. She's just gone on maternity leave. So I'll be presenting the next 3 items. I've never shared the screen on Zoom before. So this is the first for me. If you bear with me, please.
Chi'n gallu gweld y sgrin rwan?
Are you able to see the screen? Yes? It's a success, John. Great, thank you. John, can I just ask, are there any speakers that should be let in to talk in relation to this application? No, they can be permitted into the meeting now. The only thing is they've asked that they not be recorded while they're making their presentation or statement. So I don't know the best way forward. It's all being recorded, I think, isn't it? Is it possible for us not to record? It is all being recorded, but what we do is agree with him or her that we remove the presentation or statement from what is actually being broadcast, because it's not live in any case. Is the speaker in favor or against, by the way? I'm not sure, to be honest. And I don't know either. In favor, I believe. Yes, they are in favor. Are you happy for me to let the applicant in and that you can explain the proceedings? Can I just ask you one? Do we wait for the officer to put forward the application first and then the speaker comes in? I'll give my presentation first and then the speaker can speak. I've just let the applicant in. So can you just explain? what's been agreed. Iwan, are you going to explain what's the name of the speaker? Kerry Thomas. Kerry, if I can just explain to you, this meeting is being recorded. It will continue to be recorded whilst you're speaking, but what we'll be able to do is we will be able to remove what you've said in the meeting during the 3 minutes that you get to address the meeting from anything that's being broadcasted publicly. That's all we can do. If you're not happy with that, then I'm afraid, unfortunately, you won't be able to take part. Can you just confirm one way or another, please?
That's fine, thank you. Diolch.
Yes, confirmed. That's fine. Okay, then. This application is in front of you today because it's been called in by a member. As you can see, it's to remove condition 2 of the permission food to go or a takeaway. This is the location of the application, Llanderfy Terrace. For information, it's just within the retail centre as it's defined in the LDP. This is a photo of the site, the red building here. In the surrounding area, especially when you go. You're breaking up a bit, John. I don't know if I don't think the members are understanding what you're saying very well. Could you maybe turn your video off, John, because you're sharing your screen and using video as well. Can you hear me better now that I've turned my video off? Yes, that's much better. Thank you. So the application is to remove condition 2 of the historical planning permission on this site. Condition 2, stop the selling of hot food from the site. Historically, this was in place because of the effect of smells or aroma in the evening. The cafe is open until 10:30, and condition 2 relates to the hot takeaways. As we understand it, the cafe has been operational to provide hot takeaways since before the current owners took over in 2016. So hot food's been sold from the premises since at least 2016. So the condition was there because, well, at the time there was no cafe. The 2 original conditions were put in place. What's important in this case is that no complaints have been received over the years, that the hot takeaways have been provided for quite a while. So in the absence of any concerns from local residents or statutory consultees, we are of the opinion that we can get rid of condition 2 and the application is acceptable. Thank you very much. So we have a speaker, Kerry Thomas, you have 3 minutes. Okay, thank you very much for that. Who's going to speak first? Do we have a proposal at all? Alwyn? Thank you very much, Chair. 2 things. First of all, I can see that the Community Council are concerned that there's another takeaway business not far away. How far away is that? And secondly, can we ensure that the signage that draws attention to this business is either in Welsh or bilingual? Did you want to come back on that, Chairman? Or as I understand it, the business is next door, but I'm not 100% sure. But perhaps the applicant can confirm. For information, we have received one letter this week. I received a letter this morning saying the same thing, raising concerns that there's a business next door who sells similar things. But of course, that's not a planning matter in any case. They may be selling similar things, but it's not anything to consider here today. That's between the two businesses and it's not a planning matter. With regard to the signage, that is an additional request if they want to change the signage. It's not something to be considered today. But we can ask them to put Welsh or bilingual signs there. Yes, it's up to them if they want to do that. But it's not something for consideration this morning. Edgar, you're on mute at the moment, Edgar. Yes, to be honest, I really don't understand why we're discussing this today. The thing is, a member has called this in because there's competition. Well, competition is not a planning matter. So I don't understand why the member has put this forward. And he knows that in any case. And so I don't understand why you accepted for this to be discussed. We should have told the member, him or her, you know very well that you're not to call this in unless it's a planning matter. I don't think we should have accepted it as a part of the agenda in any case. I do propose that we approve the recommendation to pass this today. We accepted this to come to committee because the member raised the matter of amenities of the neighbours. That is a planning matter, and that's why it was drawn to the committee's attention. So Edgar has made a proposal to approve, seconded by Gethin. Did you want to speak, Gethin? I just wanted to second the approval. I think it's important to have competition. I'm happy to support the idea of having bilingual signage, certainly, and happy to support. I can't see anybody else wanting to speak. Everybody in favour, please. Green button. Anybody against? Red button. That's anonymous in favour as far as I can see. Permitted.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Okay, if you can just turn your green switches off, please. Blue bill. O, clychau'r gog, cod y fronallt o gellau. I'll try and share my screen once again. My PowerPoint froze all the time, so hopefully it'll work a bit better this time around.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, could I be removed from the committee?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Jane? I did.
So,
the committee didn't hear.
Yeah, is it possible to be removed from the committee for this item, please?
Yeah, okay.
Jane has declared an interest in this, so we'll put Jane in the waiting room now. 2 seconds, thank you. Jane is now in the waiting room. As you can see, this is direction of 2-storey side extension, front porch to the rear of the existing dwelling in Clychau'r Gog, Cod y Fronallt o Gylla. As you can see, the location to the northeast of Dolgellau. And you can see where the site is. There's quite a bit of room around the houses. This is the southerly elevation. And this is where a part of the work will happen. Between the patio door and the small window on the right-hand side, there will be a new porch. I'll show you the plans in a minute. This is the easterly elevation, and this is where the two-story extension would be. You can see a bit like a roof there. I'm not sure if it's a log store. You can see it's there on the easterly elevation. That's where the extension would go. This is another view of where the extension would be on the right-hand side. There's quite a bit of screening already on site. This is the original plan. I'll just show you once again. The main changes is a porch would be here and the extension would go here. The two-story extension would be located here. So this is the plan as it would look or will look. A few new windows and the two-story extension there. It's to accommodate 2 new bedrooms. The reason why it's in front of committee this morning is it's against policy. That is Development Policy 15. I'm sure you're aware of it. If somebody wants to have an extension, then the footprint should be smaller or the height should be lower than the original house. The footprint is smaller in this case, but as you can see from the plans, this is higher than the original. So in general, the policy is a good principle. 9 times out of 10, it works that the design should incorporate a lower house, and most times we feel that it works well because of design, etc. As the 3rd bullet point explains there, and we should consider it on merit, and we do have the right to go against our policies if there are relevant issues to take into consideration, and we do feel that it's an improvement perhaps to the original house with the extension, and so we are therefore happy to approve the application in front of us. Okay, thank you. Do we have a speaker? No, we don't have a speaker. Does anybody want to make a proposal? Edgar? You're on mute, Edgar. Propose that we go along with the recommendation. Gethin? I think I need a bit more explanation rather than we feel that we can approve it. I had an application in my ward for a 2-story extension, and the roof were just a few centimeters, I believe, higher than the original building, and that plan looked much better than this extension. I don't think we're being consistent. I can't speak about any other applications, I'm afraid. The design, as we know, it's a matter of opinion. It's related to how the appearance of the building, the massing, how it sits next to the original house. I think the main aim of the policy, and this is something general, not just for the park, the extension should not dominate the original house. It shouldn't look as if it's the original house that's the extension. It should look like the main house and that's an extension on that. If you don't think it's acceptable, of course you have your right to refuse it, but officers, and I feel quite strongly that this looks totally fine. I'm happy with the design and I'm happy to approve it for so that it's permitted in this case, and this is what we're discussing today. Officers feel that it looks totally acceptable and is in fact an improvement to what's already there. I disagree. I think it's an overbearing and I think it's inconsistent with what we've refused over the years. Thanks, Gethin. You can vote in accordance with your conscience. Edward has proposed that we approved. We have a seconder for that. I can't see that we do have a seconder. Owain? I'm ready to second that, yes. Okay, we'll put it to the vote. Everybody in favour of permitting it? Green. Anybody against? Red cross, please. I can see everybody in favour except for one red cross. Motion carried. We'll move on to the next one, which is the last one, item 4.4. Can I ask who the speaker is, please? And are they in favour or against? Emma Jones is the speaker, but I don't know if they're for or against. She's in favour. I'll bring Jane back in. And are you also happy for Emma to come in right at the beginning of this item? Yes, of course. Jane is now back and Emma has now joined us. Okay, Jonathan. Yes, I'm presenting this again. It's a pity that Jona's gone off on maternity with 3 applications in committee. Anyway, can you see the PowerPoint now? No, no, we can't. I passed the test twice with sharing the screen, but obviously not the 3rd time. Okay, we're seeing it now. Yes, we can see it now. As you can see from the description, this is an application for siting 3 camping pods for short-term holiday use and a new sewage system, sewage treatment system. This is the location, and I think it's important that we give a bit of background because it's important in relation to how we came to conclusion. This has been submitted to committee because the application doesn't quite meet the requirements of the policy. The second part of the criteria are not met exactly, we don't feel, but we did feel that it should be discussed in committee, and that's why it's here today. And member just saying, John, you're breaking up really badly again. The members can't understand what you're saying properly. If you just want to hold on for a second while I look for headphones in another room. I'll be about 30 seconds, that's all. John, that is.
Right, so ydych chi'n gallu clywed fi wan?
Dan?
Hopefully you can all hear me now. Is that better? I don't think that my microphone is working on the laptop, so hopefully that's better. So as I was explaining, this has come before this committee this morning because even though there are 5 criteria within the 29 policy, which is the main policy that we are dealing with in terms of this application, it reaches 4.5 of them, doesn't quite complete half of one of them, which is an important principle, but we feel that the application is acceptable when considering the location, etc. So the location is important. So it's just for me to try and explain to you, as you can see here, Llanedrin, this road, where this marker pen is following, it comes to an end here, which I think is important. It's not a busy highway, it's quite remote. So the location is an important consideration here. So here we have the road that I was just showing you now, and where it comes to an end. There's a building here. It's an agricultural building, and this is the site. And as you can see, there are 3 pods located here. There is no screening here, so that's partly why it doesn't actually meet the policy's criteria. The policy requires it to be screened with growth, which is currently there. And we shouldn't depend on additional planting in order to screen sites. And also, I think that the context in terms of the wider landscape here is quite important here, because unlike some places where there's quite a wild landscape, in more northern areas of the park, this area, in our opinion, we do feel that it could take this development better, possibly, compared to other places within the park. As it happens, they also intend, or they are proposing, to plant more trees along here. We've received those plans, and we only received those this week. So we will have to check that in greater detail to see whether it's possible to put a planning condition in there if we feel that there's a need for more, but they're currently being considered at the moment. So there's additional screening to be placed here. As you can see, there is a hedge that's already there on the southern side of this development. And they're also proposing to put there in terms of trees along that hedge. And so, yeah, we feel, even though it doesn't quite reach the criteria 2 in terms of the current screening, and that it is open to being viewed from outside of the site. But the feeling is, because of its location and the landscape around there, we feel that it will look and it will be acceptable. And here you can see an image of the pod. It's not that large as the policy requires. So it's 3 meters in width and 5.9, I think, in length. So here we have a photograph of the site. This is the highway that's coming to a dead end, really, where there will be additional planting along where that fence now exists. And you can see from the signs there, that's where the pods will be located. From those arrows, you can see that. And there you can see it again. So this is the view from the other map, from the southern side. And this was the hedge that's already there, as I mentioned. And they wish to add to that with a few more trees to be planted. And those plans have came in this week. So we just need to take a look at those to make sure that they are acceptable. But if it's not quite what we want, then we can put that in as a planning condition. So just gives you the assessment, the emphasis on the policy 29. It's on supporting small-scale developments where environmental and visual impacts are kept to an absolute minimum. the proposed development would comply with all the requirements of the Development Policy 29, with the exception of the latter half of criterion 2, as I've already mentioned. So those bullet points more or less explain what I've already discussed with you. So I won't go through those again, but we do feel that they have done enough to mitigate so that we're able to put this forward for recommendation. So the recommendation is to approve this application, but of course it's based on the discussions and what's included in your papers. Thank you. So welcome to the applicant, Emma Jones. You have 5 minutes to speak to us. Thank you.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, bore da. Hello, I have a short presentation to give to you just now, so which you should have had a copy of already, so please bear with me. Would you like me to share my screen? I don't know if that's possible.
No, yeah, okay.
Well, no, mae rheol yn deud.
Okay.
No, the rules and regulations state that you are not allowed to share screen, that you're only allowed to speak.
That's fine. I'll carry on and I'll read from my script, so thank you.
Okay.
Diolch yn fawr iawn am gael y cyfle I siarad efo chi heddiw.
So thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak to you today.
Mae'n ddrwg gen I.
I apologise. I am a Welsh learner.
Dwi yn mynd I siarad yn Saesneg nawr.
But I will now turn to English.
Our family have farmed at Nant Madden since 1936, when Edwin's grandparents took on the tenancy of the farm. The farm was purchased by the family in 2009, and Edwin is now the third generation of the Jones family farming the land, working with his mother, Beryl, and myself. We have 2 young children, Isla, who is 8, and Owain, who is 6. Our children attend the local school, Ysgol Cragadarin, and we actively participate in the local community. I am currently the Vice Chairman of Neuadd Egrin in the local village of St Egrin, and I was the Treasurer of the local Cilchmaithrin for several years. Edwin is a past chairman of the local FUW branch and the local Young Farmers Club. The farming industry is going through a significant period of change, and we are fully aware that our business must adapt accordingly. We continuously monitor and develop the business to enable us to remain profitable and ensure that our farm can be passed on to the next generation. We believe that it is vitally important that we maintain and develop our farming business to support the Welsh rural community here. Ensuring that we have a viable business will enable the next generation to carry on here and maintain an active role in the rural community. To develop our business, we have carefully considered diversification opportunities which would complement our existing farming enterprises. We have been enabled by positive planning policies such as Development Policy 29, Alternative Holiday Accommodation, and with the support of Bailey and partners, to consider developing a glamping pod enterprise that would provide valuable additional income to the farm. We have applied for planning permission to erect 3 pods in a small field named Kai Blythe, which is a short distance from the main farm buildings and adjacent to the council road. We deliberated very carefully about the location of the glamping pods, and this field provides the best fit for our farm in terms of access to the site from the council road, complementing our farming enterprises, health and safety, and screening of the site. We have taken the recommendations provided by the planning officer into consideration regarding the size and number of pods, and our application reflects this. Furthermore, we will maintain the existing screening along the southeastern and western boundaries of the field, as well as planting an additional native species hedge along the north side of the field adjacent to the council road. We will also plant standard native trees between the pods and on the southeastern boundary. This will provide significant biodiversity enhancement to the farm. In relation to NRW comments, we will ensure that all sewerage requirements are incorporated, and we will erect a short section of dry stone wall at the entrance of the field to complement other sections of dry stone wall at the entrance to the farm and the adjacent field. We have detailed in the plan.
Time's up. Sorry.
Thank you.
Iawn, mae'r 3 munud ar ben.
Right, the 3 minutes are up, I'm afraid. Thank you for that presentation. Gethin. Yes, thank you, Chair. I propose the recommendations. I do have a minor question. Do they stand on the field, or is there an element of cut and fill in order to bring the level up somewhat. Just a comment, it may have helped with the visibility then on the side of the road. I don't know, just a question. Well, as I understand it, there is an element of cut and fill. But if you want to ask that directly of the applicant, then you can do that through the chair, if they're happy to do so. Well, I was just looking at the field and your presentation, and I was just thinking that you'd have to have, or if there wasn't a cut and fill on the planning, but I think you've already responded to it. You've already answered the question. So do we have a seconder, please? It's been proposed. Do we have a seconder, John? Brian.
Thank you, Chair. I have three questions. One relates to the policy in relation to it being a farm diversification enterprise. I understand there has been a farm diversification plan submitted. In general terms, are we confident that the decision is being made in relation to the business as a standalone business rather than it being a multi-income business? So in other words, is the judgment of the farming aspect being taken solely on the basis of it, the farming enterprises? The second question relates to drainage and water, and I understand that NRW have suggested what should be in place there. Bearing in mind the proximity of the watercourse to the outfield, I presume we have to take their advice, but it seems very close on a relatively strong gradient to the watercourse at the bottom of the field. So hopefully that has been done appropriately. And thirdly, in the conditions, this is under condition 6, there's a rather strange word used there, in my opinion. It may be a translation issue, where it says should development be not occupied for a period of 2 years, 24 months, the accommodation units and any associated paraphernalia must be removed. I'm hoping that associated paraphernalia there refers also to the drainage system and the outfield. Because if that is returned to other uses, the existence of that could create all sorts of issues.
Jonathan.
So clarification on those points should be welcome, please.
Yes, Brian. Yes, it's the farming element was considered as part of the diversification, so that's why it achieves the first criteria of the policy. So we're satisfied with that. On the drainage side, yeah, we are bound by what NRW asked for, and they were content with the proposal. So that's been satisfied as far as we're concerned. Apologies, Brian, I missed your third point there.
The third point was to do with the condition 6, which is to do with should the business cease to trade, that the pods and associated paraphernalia. I want confirmation that associated paraphernalia includes the drainage system, the sewage system, and the associated pipe works and outfield pipes.
It can do. If that's what the committee wants, I'm guessing associated paraphernalia is open to interpretation, should it come to having to remove them from the site. So if the committee wants it to be specified in more details to exactly what should be removed, including drainage, etc., then we can add that into the committee to the condition.
The reason for raising it is it kind of the policy originally was brought in with the concept of the sewage being in a separate building, which is part of the sort of building complex, and therefore drainage is associated. Here we have effectively a drainage system which is in an open location. Should that land go back to agriculture in the future, the existence of that sort of drainage system could be a hindrance to further uses of the field in the future. So what we're putting in place is very much a permanent system. So if we're removing the pods, surely we should be removing the drainage system as well.
Okay, yeah, to be clear then.
It's a point of principle there that I think we have to be clear in our minds as to what's appropriate.
Yeah, And I think you're right, it's not clear at the moment because I think that condition is there for landscape purposes more than anything, really. So yeah, it probably would be open to interpretation if it ever came to a case for removing stuff. So if the committee wants, we can add specifically the drainage to that condition if the committee agrees to that.
Iawn, ddod i at hwnna yn y diwedd. John?
Okay, we'll come to that at the end, John. Yes, I'm very happy to support and to see someone on diversifying. And we often complain that Welsh people or young Welsh people are leaving rural areas and they have to diversify in order for the business to survive. So I'm happy to support. And when? Thank you, Chair. I'm of the same opinion. I would support this recommendation because in the world of agriculture, it's become so difficult. And there's probably worse to come. So we've got a young family here who are looking to diversify in order to gain additional income for the farm. And I can't see in terms of the plans that it impairs on anything else. So I'm 100% in favour of granting this. Edgar. I agree with what Brian has just said, and taking things away from there if it becomes vacant for a period of 24 months, and also in terms of planting more trees, as John mentioned in his presentation. Otherwise, I'm 100% behind this. And if any signage goes up, then they need to be bilingual. Apart from that, I'm 100% in support. Yes, we can ask for bilingual signage. Owen. Thank you, Chair. I've noticed in the report that no response has come from in terms of the highways. So from looking at that first map that Jonathan showed, it was right at the further end of quite a narrow lane or narrow road. I'm not aware, are there any other visitor developments along that road? What sort of additional traffic that they would expect or produce within this context? I know that there are only 3 pods here, but I'm a little bit concerned in improving this without us receiving comments in terms of highways. I have checked the online file just now, and they're still not on the public record in terms of the highways. So I'm more than happy to receive the recommendations with 2 amendments. One to support what Brian has just raised, and I would also perhaps add that the infrastructure as well should be added to that wording. And then secondly, that it should be comply with comments from the Highways Department. Thank you. Jonathan, would you like to come back? Yes, on the highways, we don't always receive comments on every application from the Highways Department. So we could ask them for specific comments on this. I don't think that the effect in terms of transport would be very much. You're only talking about 3 pods. You're talking about 3 cars going up and down this lane, say 2-3 times a day. So I see that as quite low impact. Possibly that's why Highways hasn't responded. But if you feel that it's something that you want certainty on, then we can certainly ask them to respond to it. The Highways Department are under pressure like everyone else currently. So there may be some delay and it may delay the decision. But if that's the wish of the committee, then we can certainly ask them for a formal comment. Well, normally, unless Highways respond, then they are happy. That's how I've seen things happening over the years. I accept the point, and it's quite possible that the impact is low, but I'm just aware of other planning applications that I've dealt with. The highways have to do towards quite narrow lanes, and in some cases, they put places to pass in. So as a principle, I think we should consult with the Highways Department on this application and to ask their opinion on this. Elfed? Yes, I'm very supportive of this application. The only thing I agree with Gethin with the cut and fill. They should be standing above the ground. In terms of the owners then, where will they park then? Where will they be parking? Will they be parking within the entrance? Or will they be able to take the cars to the pods? They will be parking outside of that field, next to the farm itself. So there will be a little bit of walk to the pod. Perhaps they could park a little bit closer to the pod at the beginning of the week to unpack, but then the cars are parked off that site next to the farm. Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak before we go to a vote? So is the proposer and the seconder, are they happy? And also that we should ask what Brian has just noted, and also Owain's suggestion that we should go to highways to ask why they haven't commented on this application. Gethin. Well, just to confirm then that they're not opposed. Well, it's the same thing. If you're asking for comments, that's the same. Gethin. No, it's not the same. Because if it's down to workload, but I do think that we need clarity. If they have any concerns or any opposition to this, that's the reason why we're asking the question. Gethin. I'm happy with the comments that have been made by Brian, Chair, but otherwise I propose, as has been noted on the document, that we accept. Who's the seconder for this? John Pugh. Yes, I agree with Gethin and I agree with what Brian has said. But I know highways are so busy. If there'd been a problem, I'm sure they would have come back to us. It's common sense. And when? I agree with what Brian has said. In terms of the highways, I've been along that way a couple of times. It though goes towards the church in that area. And also the transport has now decreased since they closed the old Llanegrin school. So I would have thought that the transport is quite quiet there, and the only transport are to local farms in that area. So I don't think that highways would have any comment to make anyway, and that's probably why they haven't responded. If I may just come in on that point and to explain the process. Normally, as Brian mentioned, it would be proposed as an amendment, but I'm happy with what he has stated, that the amendment has now been incorporated in the proposal, and then that will be taken to the vote. But Owain has brought some additional comments in terms of highways, so it's up to Owain whether he wants to put an additional amendment forward, and then to see whether there is a seconder for that amendment before we go to a vote. So Owain, would you like to propose? Yes, I did propose. I did say that there are two proposals. There are two amendments, Brian and mine. Well, what I'm trying to say is that part of that proposal has now been incorporated into the original proposal. If you want to do the second part as an amendment and as a formal amendment, then we need to find out whether there's a seconder for that. So is there a seconder for Owain's amendment? Brian, I think, has seconded.
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
So we'll go to a vote. So the amendment goes up first, is that correct? Yes, the amendment first, that we should permit, but that's, we need to have a response first from highways. And that also includes the issues that relate, well, everything else that has been covered then. So everyone who is in favour, please, of the amendment, please show.
Mae'n gyfartal.
I think it's equal, 7 each. So I'll go now then, and according to what's happened before, and we need to ask now how many voting against the amendment. So I'll take the voting off. So we've now cleared the feedback. So we now go the permission that will grant the planning application, but that the drainage and everything will have to be taken away. So everyone who's in favour of that, a green in favour, red cross against. I think they're all green. Yes, they're all green. So that's been passed. Granted. So I think that's it in terms of the planning applications. Now we'll take a look at the compliance cases. I think that's on page 45. 46. Page 47. Chair? Page 48, actually. Could we have an explanation in terms of what has happened with the work on the forestry tracks? And the file has been closed after actually asking for. Who would like to respond to this? The works to forestry.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, it was ascertained that there was a breach there in relation to the creation of the track. It's already in existing forestry, and it's connected down to 2 tracks connecting down to join those 2 together. We did ask and advise a retrospective application should be submitted, but we've had no application forthcoming, and obviously attempts to try and get an application have not been fruitful. So on that instance, we then have to consider the expediency of whether we continue to pursue formal action, or whether in this particular instance, whether not to take that action. And this instance, because of the length of time and so forth, that it has been determined that it's not expedient on this occasion.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Can I go back to page 47, please? Item 5 and 6. There's an expectation for developments at the end of January and February. Is there an update, please, on points 5 and 6? Dolwydd Elan and Betws y Coed. Well, I can speak to point 6, the Zip World. We have visited the site, and we are having discussions with the officers just to see what they've submitted as a planning application and what has been built on site, so that we're able to go back to them with what is needed and also the next steps in order to solve the problem. Do you have a timescale? A specific timetable for this? Not yet, no, unfortunately, we don't. What about the other item, the 5, the Gwalia Stores Dolwydd Elan? From what I've understood, we are chasing the applicant to submit an application. We haven't heard anything further yet. So what will the result of that be then? Are you threatening to prosecute in order for them to move and to do something about it?
In relation to that particular one, obviously, it's a change of use from a retail to dwelling, and that's something that's serious. If we don't actually get any kind of application forthcoming, we certainly have to consider the expediency of taking formal action in that regard in this particular instance and the circumstances that involve in relation to this particular item.
Iawn, diolch, Jane.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Jane. Anwen. Going back to page 46.3, Hafod Wen Harlech. Have you had a response from the owner because there's work still ongoing. I receive complaints. Even though it's not in my ward, I do receive complaints from local people. They are claiming if you go down to the beach, then you will see more work going on than what you could actually see from the highway. Well, we've been to the site and we've seen the work that's ongoing there, and we've written to them, but unfortunately we haven't had a response yet. But we will be chasing them because we are aware that we have received lots of complaints on this matter. Thank you. I think we're now on page 49. Mr. Chair, page 49, number 12, Llwynon Llanbedr. I don't know whether you've received a response, but I think that this site is advertised as an Airbnb by the owner. I don't know the owner. I'm someone who lives away. He doesn't live there. So I'm afraid I can't help any further in terms of the owner. So no one lives there permanently. So I don't know how you're going to get hold of this owner. Jane, is that yours?
Thanks. No, absolutely. In respect to the owner, I'm hoping that they'll be having checks if it is an Airbnb, that they'll be having checks, or post will make its way to where they are. In terms of this one, I do believe that there is it's questionable whether it's actually permitted development or whether it does need permission. And there is a way that it's down to sort of the height of the actual fence and the wall next to the highway. I do think that there is a way whereby they can actually reduce that to actually fall under permitted development rights. So there is a way forward on that, but obviously we just need to be able to make contact with the owner and discuss that with them.
The only other concern that I have with this, since this wall has been built, there are some who then come and stay here. They park along the highway, as I'm sure you know, and the problems that exist in Llanbedr currently. And this doesn't help that issue. Previously, before that wall was built, they were able to park in front of the house. So they've added to the problem, to the parking problem, by building this wall. The officers will take a look at the problem. Thank you. So we'll go on to page 50. 51. Chair, I've read through this. Aberdyfi concerns me. It's as if they can do as they wish. We've got 7 here who have submitted applications retrospectively. I've never seen so many from one area, people doing as they want, whether it's decking or whatever it may be. One of them came before us today, of course, that takeaway. And she did state that she did know, she did apologize, and she stopped selling. Is it possible to stop these people from doing these things until they submit the planning application? You know, it seems to me that if you live in Aberdyfi, you don't need planning. I don't know why. Aren't they receiving the correct information? I don't know. So that's one point. And also there's one there on page 51, and there's another one on page 63. Sorry, 53, 54, 55, 59, 60, 62. I don't know what's going on in Aberdyfi. Perhaps somebody could enlighten me. Would anyone like to venture and answer that question?
Yes, certainly. I'll try and answer it. I mean, obviously, we can't sort of depict where actual breaches of planning control are going to come from, and it just seems, I find, into being in this job for quite a while now, that you find that you have pockets of areas that suddenly you'll get an influx of of breaches of planning control, and then other areas are very quiet for years, and then suddenly it just maybe seems on this instance that we're getting more concerns raised in Abu Dhabi at this time. I mean, certainly it would be great if we had the resources where we could be proactive. Unfortunately, we're reactive, so it might be a case that in Abu Dhabi they're more prone to raising concerns in relation to breaches of planning control.
Dyna yr union pwynt o'n i am wneud
That was
hefyd.
the exact point I was going to make, actually. It's quite a populated area. The majority of this list are complaints that we receive, and we have to respond to those complaints. And the fact that Abu Dhabi is quite a large town within the park, and that partly explains the reason why there are so many cases arising in Abu Dhabi. There isn't anything major there. They are quite low level, but I think it's important that we deal with them, but they are quite low level issues in the majority. Do you think it would help if we actually wrote to the Community Council and draw their attention to this, for them to do some work on the ground, as it were? Well, the National Park has the power to do that. Yeah, but just to let people know that they do need to apply for planning permission before they begin doing any work.
I just sort of make a comment in respect to that we've got quite a good contact with Abu Dhabi Community Council, that they are normally sort of quite they're sort of quite vocal in terms of sort of raising any issues. They contact us directly. Obviously, we did have the surgery there at one time, so we sort of saw them on a regular basis. But certainly I could make contact with them to just sort of raise the issue in general.
Thank you. Ryan.
Thank you, Chairman. Number 30 on page 53, which is one in Abu Dhabi. And it may again just be the description, but 2 sheds being used as holiday accommodation worries me for a number of issues, a number of reasons in relation to your safety as much as anything. If they are timber sheds that are being used for holiday accommodation. I see that this was raised first in August, so it's still relatively new. But as we're moving into holiday season again, if it's going to continue, do we know what is actually going on there? And even if an application was made, do we think that it's a sensible thing anyway?
My understanding is that this was one that was originally dealt with by Iona Roberts, and obviously she's gone on maternity leave. My understanding is with this that we have advised them to cease using the sheds as additional holiday accommodation, and certainly I'll have a look to see in terms of exactly where we are. I don't know whether David's got any sort of further update with that, but I appreciate your concerns in relation to the submission of any application that would be forthcoming with those holiday.
I mean, if it is a question of that they are not really suitable buildings for that purpose, planning aside, if we have the powers to request cease until that is resolved, I think we should look into that, because it would not look good if we delay because of the bureaucracy of going through all the process for planning. If in fact something bad happened, it wouldn't look very good against the authority in relation to that. So I just think we need a little bit more assurance that we're taking the right route in relation to that particular case.
Certainly, we can also liaise with Gwynedd Council. I'm not sure whether they've actually been contacted at all about the situation there. Ourselves, we haven't got any powers to sort of do immediate cessation. And they can continue if they do to trade, but obviously if they do that, then it comes to the point that of looking at potentially initially taking formal action.
If I just, I'm concerned of things like fire and all those sort of issues. That if it's not been through the planning process, those things won't have been considered, and therefore we could be laying ourselves open to reputational risk, if nothing else.
if I just come in and say they have advised that they have ceased the use, but obviously this is something we'd have to check and monitor. And they've also advised that they want to submit a planning application.
I mean, that's the planning application is fine. It's the interim period I'm concerned about.
Certainly, if it's a case that they've stipulated that they ceased, that we need to ensure that actually has taken place. Obviously, if they've been advertising on social media and so forth, we can check on that, and obviously we can carry out relevant site visit as well to get confirmation that it has actually ceased.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to carry on.
Just to carry on, thanks for that, Jane. In every case like this, Brian's totally right. We should say to the fire service to inspect every site that we find, really, of this type of nature, so that they visit the site. On to page 54. Me again, I'm afraid. Jane, can we have an update? Every time I go to the community council, they always ask me for an update on 35. No, apologies for that. 39, land at Hengwrt. The site is getting worse. Are you talking about 35 or 39? I'm talking about number 39 on page 55. Hengwrt at Llanellid. Can we have an update on that, please?
Yeah.
Is there a court case ongoing? Thanks, Jane.
Thanks. There is a court case ongoing, and that's with NRW, and that seems to keep getting delayed each time. From what I understand, I think it has again. So it's not going to be heard till later on in the year. Obviously, I'm conscious of the fact that that I think they're actually discussing that they're actually prosecuting the company that's actually dumped the waste there. So I'm pursuing with the owners, and I've done a planning contravention notice, and I'm currently waiting replies on that. I'm conscious that we've heard news that there might be an issue sort of with ownership there, sort of has happened recently. So I've undertaken a planning contravention notice to ascertain exactly to see what the situation is.
I think that
what the local community are concerned about is the mattresses and carpets are rotting away. So the microfibers are going to disappear into the Mawddach system, really, and into the nearby land. Nobody seems too concerned about that situation. And the request from Community Council in Llanellid is, why can't NRW or whoever is responsible, or Gwynedd Council, why can't they just remove the materials in order to improve the situation and get on with what the court case in the meantime?
I believe that you've raised this previously, and I've actually raised it directly with NRW and the contact I have there. And I do believe a visit went out, and they was undertaken at that time, and they didn't seem to think there was any issues at all. But what I can do is I can revert back to NRW and raise those specific concerns from the community and forward those on.
I would really appreciate that, so that I can have something on paper from the NRW to take back to the Community Council to show as evidence. Thanks very much for that, Jane. Okay, on to page 56, 57, 58, 59. In relation to page 59, Chair, 3 Glandwr, Bryn Craig. This has been going on since 2017 and through a family member. There have been several complaints. It's really untidy and getting worse. After taking a letter to the owner, have we received a response to that?
To date, I've not had a response with that letter, but it's taken me a long time to actually sort of find where the owner is. But I believe I have found them now. If I don't get any response to that communication, that I do plan to visit to see whether I can actually get to speak to the owner face to face and discuss the situation at Bryn Craig, because we're aware obviously of the very poor condition of the property and that it's getting a lot worse.
It's really affecting the nearby houses by now as well in the village, you know. Okay, we'll pursue that, shall we, Jane?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just go back to number 43 on page 58? I note there that a planning application for a rural enterprise dwelling has been submitted for this. I just want to ask the question whether it's likely that's to come to committee in view of some of the nature of what's gone before.
Dwi ddim yn credu bod angen I hwnna fynd ger bron y pwyllgor.
I don't think that needs to go to committee.
Okay. I just was wondering, it depends on the nature of what comes forward in the application as to what you think. I'm not quite clear from the description there as to whether it's the continued use of the caravan or whether it's something completely different.
No, it's the actual application isn't for the continued use of the caravan. It's actually for a rural enterprise dwelling.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, John.
John?
Charlie.
You're on mute, John. Page 60, number 45. I was just wondering if there's any development on Nanai. Jane, once again, is it?
Yes. Yes, there is development in that we've actually gained access into Nanai. And I went with one of the consultants that's assisting with this. Yes, the condition of it is poor. We're looking at getting a contractor to have a look specifically in terms of the best way of how we can go about in terms of the actual sort of shoring up and improving the condition of the roof to stop sort of the water ingress that's still currently taking place. The fact that inside the building itself, it's almost like a shell. It's been completely stripped, albeit all of the main doors and so forth, fireplaces that are all being stored downstairs. And it is a case that the water ingress is not actually sort of making any massive damage to the walls itself because the water is able to just drip straight down. So we're looking at getting a contractor to see sort of the best way of getting some kind of looking at ways of how we can do sort of roof repairs in terms of going forward and looking at doing an urgent repairs notice on that.
Hello. Thank you for that. Gethin? Thanks, Jane, and thank you for all the work that you're undertaking in this case. But our case, hearing the words that the inside has been stripped, it's a listed building, isn't it? In your opinion, therefore, has any work been undertaken that is against the conditions of the listed building, and do we now need to pursue that as well?
In terms of the work that's taken place there, there was years ago, there was, and I believe that what has taken place has happened years ago, and it's literally everything's just come to a stop. And it was implementing some kind of works that they've had some consent for, but it's come literally, say it's been left for many years. But it's something that now we've been able to actually look inside, and we can ascertain to see exactly what was what with the previous permissions that have been there. I only went into the building last Thursday, so I haven't had an opportunity to sort of look into sort of any more into that. Just obviously we've only just got the access into it, but it's yeah, so it's a case that obviously we need to have that opportunity to go through that history, which is quite extensive there as well. Obviously, with the situation at Nanai, because it's been empty for so many years, it is an old case, and there is old history that we need to go through. It will take some time.
Okay, thank you, Jane. I was just concerned that as it's a listed historic building, time has no relevance. Whatever the building and the internal aspects of the building were registered for, we should be protecting them. But yeah, I appreciate all the work.
Absolutely, and that's how obviously we've been involved, and we're sort of getting we can in terms of the processes that we have in place to do that.
Okay, thank you. Page 62. Yes, Mr. Chairman. These headings are not correct throughout the whole of the papers. It says September 2018. There are some with 2020 on, and they've been on our books, so to speak, for years. Especially number 47 there. What's happening with that by now?
Yeah. Yes. The issue that we had there is that I was liaising previously with the previous listed building officer, and it's one that I do need to pursue, and hopefully, all being well, I'll try and get an update to the next committee.
Another question that I had: if you're going to see somebody to tell them what they're doing wrong and that they need planning, etc. It states on this report sometimes that the applicants are looking at their options. Well, if they require planning, they don't have options, surely, or it should be demolished. I don't understand why we can't move quicker on this. It seems to be dragging things out. It's just going on and on and on. So we should try and clear all of these, to be honest. I don't know who can answer that question as such. Neither do I. Perhaps I can come in here, in fact. I can almost feel Jane's frustration through the screen and the members' frustration as well. The compliance world is not simple. It's not black and white. It's not a matter of writing to somebody and there you have a solution. 9 times out of 10, we won't get a response at all when you get in touch with people. Pretty often, we don't even know who owns the property, so that's a further complexity. So these things take time. And as far as options are concerned, Edgar, pretty often the owners say if there's been a breach of planning conditions, well, or that it's claimed that there's been a breach, then they have an option to put in an application, and sometimes there may be different types of options regarding the different types of applications, so there are different discussions involved there. So taking all of that into account, and with very little resources, I know that the staff are working really hard and that it's really frustrating for them as well. It's not a direct answer to your question, but I just do know that a lot of work goes into it, and pretty often it's just not a matter of getting a solution in a matter of weeks or months. It would be brilliant if it would, obviously. I don't want you to misunderstand me. I'm not having a dig at the staff at all. If somebody started to build something without planning permission, and that it does need planning, then there's nothing to consider when they consider the option, so to speak. And should we allow that time for 6 weeks, or is it up to the applicant? I'm just wondering. Well, the main thing there is the consideration regarding the expediency as to is what they've actually done. Would we permit it if there has been a breach? And pretty often we need a bit of digging work in order to explore things, to see first if it's a serious issue which is totally black and white and not acceptable, then we would definitely pursue it legally. Often it's not black and white, and the discussion is if they're going to put in an application that can be acceptable, and that's where we have to work with the owners. But like I said, it's totally unacceptable. We then have to put an enforcement notice on site, and that does happen, like for example in Vronoli. But in a lot of these cases, we do have to try and work out to see if can they come up with something that can be permitted. That's the first question. Jane, do you think that's a fair summary?
Yes, I think so. I was just going to say that obviously, if somebody's in breach of planning control, it doesn't automatically make it a criminal offence. As Jonathan has said, that in many instances, there's that they might look at putting an application in to try and regularise it, and there's a lot of discussion in terms of maybe changing, altering what they were proposing, and so forth. So there's a lot of negotiation involved with it. And sometimes, yes, we do get to the point then when we can't negotiate any further, then it comes to the point is it expedient or not to take formal action? So in some instances, yes, you'll see some of the cases that are on there. They have rolled on for a while. But obviously that we obviously want to try and negotiate, trying to get some kind of sort of permission in place. At least then you've got the conditions and you've got some control as well back on that what was originally a breach is now then sort of potentially they've got the permission. So yeah, but obviously the last resort is taking formal action.
Yeah, I
see where you're coming from. But like John said, it is frustrating. The 3 Glandur one, for example, that's been on the list since I've been on the park and before then. So I know it's more work for you as employees to pursue the same thing time and time again and talk about it during these committees anyway. Thank you for the response. Okay, thank you for that. On to the 106 agreement for information, page 64, 65. And then the flood applications for information. Does anybody want to ask anything? Owain. This is just a general comment on this report. The numbers of cases that have been waiting more than 13 weeks have increased to 15 to 19. And I've noticed that 3 to 4 of these applications are going, well, nearing a year or 2 even. And in a lot of these cases, they're waiting for further information either from the applicant or a report on flood consequences assessments. I just feel, because this is a crucial indicator, then perhaps we should review this once again and see if we can remove some of these applications. Thank you.
certainly. Just to sort of, yeah, we do review this list on, you know, as on a constant basis, and where there's sort of we do advise applicants as well that sort of the passage of time that they might actually want to withdraw their application until they've got the relevant information and resubmit. But in some instances, the majority of the time that the applicants do, but in some instances they don't. So, but certainly we'll continue to review it.
Iawn, diolch Jane.
Okay, thank you for that, Jane. Anwen? The former Tabernacle Chapel in Harlech. I've had a lot of inquiries regarding this location because those who had intended to open the shop, etc. there, they've gone away. They've now opened a shop higher up the road, and this site, well, it looks untidy. It's not conducive for a very nice environment for visitors to Harlech, and I'm not sure if it's in the conservation area or maybe just outside. Is there anything happening here, or is there an intention with an applicant or an agent to develop it besides the shop that it was meant to be originally? I don't know if anybody can answer that.
Yeah, I am aware that there's discussions ongoing at the moment in respect to this. I think it's in relation to the open market flats. I can ask Aled Lloyd, the case officer, for an update with this, but I do know that it's ongoing. There's also with this one, there's the issue with obviously the windows that we've had there. There's an enforcement notice that's in place, and the actual detailing of those windows as well, that we're sort of currently sort of deliberating with them in respect to the windows there, in terms of the obviously complying with the enforcement notice and details of that as well. So yeah, there's a few details, and that's why we're sort of in discussion, and it's taking longer than usual.
Yeah,
okay, thank you. I would appreciate an update again. Thank you. Over the page 68. Any questions?
No.
69. Okay, so the next ones are applications that have had a decision for information. So page 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, and 79, and 80, and that's it. Unless there are any questions, the committee has now come to an end.